Neela's having doubts in ER at 11:05. First on More 4, Dr. Stevenson's next patient is KISS frontman Gene Simmons. With strong language and frank discussions about sex, this is brand new Shrink Wrap.
Fire-breathing, blood-spitting frontman of glam rock band KISS, Gene Simmons is one of America's most successful rock stars. But his fame also extends to his sexual exploits with thousands of women. Born in Israel, he was raised by a single mother who had survived a Nazi concentration camp. Her lessons still haunt him today and have helped him stride defiantly through the tough world of rock and roll. As a clinical psychologist, I wanted to find out what lay behind the facade of this controversial rock star and what gave him his relentless need for success and self-gratification.
Make yourself comfortable.
Nice to see you. Look how cool my boots are.
Your boots are very cool.
Yeah.
Are your eyes not doing well today? Are they sore today?
No, not at all. It's a complete affectation in the same way that the leather pants are. You know, the way women wear makeup and color their hair. It's a total affectation. If Shakespeare is correct and the world is a stage and we're all just players, you're playing your part, I'm playing mine.
I must say I would love to see your eyes during this interview. Would that
I must say I would love to see you without makeup during this interview. I'll do mine if you'll do yours.
Would you mind taking off your...
I don't have a problem with it.
Excellent. Thank you.
My pleasure.
I understand.
You didn't say for how long.
Help me to understand why it's important for you to keep them on.
You have more power this way. And I like power.
Power is very important to you.
Well, you wouldn't be attracted to a male if he didn't have that sense. You know, the sort of spineless, let me give you the sense. You know, that guy's not somebody you want to be around. You want to be around the guy who's got the power, the positioning. I think it's called alpha male.
Well, that would be assuming that the conversation that we're about to have and the relationship between us was one that was based on perhaps, you know, a courting situation or something like that.
Well, everything is sexual. If you whether you're Jungian or Freudian, everything is based on that. When the female of the species and male of the species sit down and talk, there's always that aura. And between the male of the species, it's the pecking order. Who's bigger, who's faster. There's always that underlying game. I'm sure your shrink will tell you the same thing.
When was the first time that perhaps you experienced what for you was the pain of not feeling powerful?
Well, we all go through our own sort of hurdles that life puts in front of us. One of the first ones was when I was about 5 or so in Israel, which is where I was born. And there was
Yes.
a bigger, older boy who kept picking on me. And of course, it was a public spectacle. So, because a real bully isn't really a bully. A bully is a public show. He wants to show everybody else his power. So the bully is a public spectacle coward. And so he has to be taken down publicly. And that means by a smaller boy who gives him more violence than he gives you. You have to rise to the occasion. So I picked up, it wasn't a bat, but it was a sort of a 2x4, you know, one of those pieces of wood, and waited for him to come around the corner in the schoolyard.
He had bullied you many times before?
Publicly, sure. And so he came around the school corner, and I swung as hard as I could and got him on the kneecap. And when he was down, I kept batting him over and over. So when the crowd came, they saw a little boy completely dominating a bigger boy. That's the last time, by the way, he ever did that to me or anybody else. You will only get the respect you demand. You're not allowed to pick on anybody else, but never let anybody else pick on you. Never.
You have a family history that involves a powerful aggressor. Your mother, for example, survived concentration camps. Would you help me to understand specifically your mother's experience as she related it to you?
Well, she was 14 years old, and although she's reluctant to talk about it a lot, she saw her mother and her entire family be led off to the gas chambers, and she saw this as a 14-year-old little girl.
How much did she actually tell you about what she went through?
It's difficult for my mother to, go through that because she lost her entire family.
Yes.
The short answer is not a lot in terms of specifics.
Yeah.
But
one can certainly understand why the theme of bullyism would be very predominant in your life.
Never let a parasite into your life.
Yes.
Don't do it. Whether it's a hooligan who happens to cheer for the wrong football team, who thinks that you should be beaten up because you cheer for the other one, find out where that mother effer lives. Find out where that person lives and torture them. Torture them for the rest of humanity so they never bother anybody again.
And what about a therapist/interviewer who might want to ask you some intrusive questions?
Of course, anything. My life's an open book. I really don't care.
There's a bit of a contradiction here, isn't there? Because on the one hand, you're saying my life is an open book.
I control it.
And so it's not really an open book.
It certainly is. It's an open book, my rules, my way, or the highway. The same way that as a woman you understand that. You're capable of doing all sorts of things, including swinging from the chandeliers and tearing your clothes off at the proper moment. It's certainly no problem. It's not the idea of being naked. It's when you decide you want to be naked. So if you're saying my life's an open book, would I run around naked and jump on the chandelier and do all that stuff? Of course. I determine when and where that is.
Yes. I certainly understand it in terms of your family history. After all, I believe that your mother survived partly because she did the hair. She was a hairdresser.
Yes.
For the wife of the commandant of the camp.
Yeah, that's true. At 14 years of age, she was allowed to eat the garbage, in the commandant's office, as long as she sort of did the hair and the makeup and so on.
Right.
I went to see a movie called Sophie's Choice with Meryl Streep, and I was in tears for the whole movie because that's my mother's story.
There was a line in your autobiography, and you talked about the fact that you didn't feel you had the right to upset your mother.
That's right.
To challenge her, perhaps. I don't want to put words in your mouth. I'm not sure what that type of upsetness would be. To hurt her, to disappoint her, to challenge her, to do anything, in fact, negative to her. You didn't have the right because of what she had been through.
More than that.
Tell me.
Well, there is no greater love than a mother has for her child. Nothing.
She was also fiercely protective of you.
Continues to be.
Yes, and you had a very, very close unit. I mean, you were a dyad. It was just you and her after your father left.
Left is not the correct word. Abandoned.
Okay.
Yeah.
When your father had gone and your mother, being a normal and young woman at that time, was interested in dating other men, that didn't sit too well with you.
Right. My two concerns were, one, I can't let another man do to my mother what my father did, which is to just abandon. Two was this sort of immature young male pup who was going, what about me? How do I fit in? Is this going to take my mother, the most important thing in my life, away from me? So there's that sort of thing.
The focus is going to be off me.
Yeah, and perhaps in the deep recesses of my mind, maybe it was abandonment. If my father can abandon me,
she could too.
Maybe my mother could. And I remember a pivotal moment in my life. I must have been 6. By that point, my father had abandoned us, and my mother, of course, had to work from dawn till late at night. And at night, she had another job at a coffee house, just right through the night. And I remember having a nightmare. And I woke up in the middle of the night crying. You want somebody to hold you or tell you it's okay because you're sort of in that half-sleep thing. And I remembered crying and then getting scared and then getting into a rage. It's like, life owes me, if, where's my mother, where's my, because you're used to being suckled and taken care of and fed and so on. I cried throughout the night. Fear, anger, rage, a sense of entitlement.
Yes.
I'm not allowed, where's my bosom, where's my safety, where's my stuff?
Yes.
And all I remember is I was so exhausted by the experience that I eventually fell asleep. The next morning the sun came up, my mother came home, she cooked me breakfast, kissed me, loved me, and life was good. And I remember pivotally, consciously being aware that no matter how much you complain, no matter how much you're afraid, no matter how much entitlement you think you are, you're going to have to be responsible for yourself to make sure you're happy. And from then on, I never looked to anybody else, including my mother, to figure out who I am, where I was going, and how I was going to go there. So at a very early age, I published my own fan magazines at 14, was the president of the school thing. There's just nothing I couldn't do because I wouldn't let myself fail.
Right. That pivotal moment, you think, was at 6 years old?
Yeah.
So a huge wounding, really, a huge narcissistic wound occurred at that time. And after that, you sort of decided, nobody else is really going to be there for me.
Nobody is going to determine my happiness. Sticks and stones may break my bones, but words can never hurt me. Actually, that's correct. It all goes back to my mother. I understand the value of who I am. And the result, by the way, perhaps, is that some people find that arrogant. That's good. You should buy some of what I got.
Well, now, your mother, too, was somebody who could take people out. I mean, who suffered no fools, I understand that she became physically violent with people who would seek to hurt you.
When I was in grade school, there was a big fig tree, and it grew from the next door neighbor, right next to the school. It grew into the schoolyard, and all the kids at school used to climb up that fig tree and get the figs. And of course, I wanted to show off because it's the nature of my personality. I went to the top of the tree. Well, the woman next door was sick and tired of it, so she came out, and of course all the kids ran away. I came down last. She caught me, and she beat me with one of those banana stalks. After the bananas are gone, there's this kind of wooden stalk that they all hang from. And she apparently, I don't recall much of it, kicked the wind out of me. One of the school kids took me by the hand, and I don't remember how badly I was hurt or not, and brought me back home. And my mother asked me, who did this to you? Why did it happen? Did you cause it? She just asked very specific questions. And I said, I'd climbed to the top of the tree and so on and so forth. And the woman next door did it? Yes. She took me by the hand, knocked on the front door of the woman and said to her, did you hit my child? She said, yes, I did. And you can tell she was a woman by herself and perhaps a little off-center. Can you tell me what you hit my child with? He went on my fig tree, and I hit him with this. And if anybody climbs on my fig tree again, I will do that again. Did you hit my child with this, with that banana stalk? Yes, I did. And I'll swear to you on my life, this is not an exaggeration, my mother, in front of me, remember, I'm all of 5 years old maybe, with both hands grabbed this banana stalk from this woman's hand. And I get choked up when I start talking about this. It was like the staff of righteousness. It was justice. It was cleansing. It was shocking. My mother started banging on top of her head with two hands. And the more she hit this woman, the farther she went out. And I'll never forget, blood was spurting out of her forehead.
Are you crying?
No. And
Did you take your glasses off?
I shan't. Can I finish the story? And she was smashing this woman on the head, and the blood was spurting everywhere. And I was, as a little child, I was shocked. Now, the end of the story is that the cops came because the police station was right down the road, and they brought myself and my mother to the station in front of the sergeant. And this is a new country where there's barely an infrastructure, and he's sitting up there and he's going, lady, did you hit that woman on top? Yes, I did. Why did you do that? well, she hit my child, and I cracked her on the head because she did that to my child. Well, you can't just do that. She goes, well, where were the police? Nobody's allowed to touch my child. And if you, I'll never forget this, and she pointed at the sergeant and said, and if you touch my child, I'll open up your head too. And they all laughed, and they let her go. And we went out of there, and I was bewildered. Again, another life lesson about you will only get the respect you demand. That woman probably never bothered another child again, because you have to stand up for yourself, and this is a line you may not cross.
It is enormously painful for you still. You are still enormously touched by this story. But you won't show me your tears. Why is that?
Well, we just met.
Fair enough. Fair enough. But your tears are precious. It's a precious story. It is such a profoundly moving story about a mother's love for her son.
Beyond anything a father could give, you know. You know, I remember as a little boy, my mother used to say the craziest things, and I didn't understand it because I was an immature young child, and I didn't quite understand what it meant. She would say, I would throw myself in front of an oncoming truck for you. What are you talking about? Why would you do that? You'll die if you do that. That's crazy. And I catch myself saying those things about my kids. I would not hesitate in the least. If I could save my children, I'd give them my life, gladly.
You began your life in Israel. What was your name?
I was born Chaim, which sounds like a cat that's throwing up a fur ball.
How old were you when you came to the United States?
8.5.
Paint a picture for me of what that was like for you to suddenly be exposed to American society, New York society.
When I came to America, I must tell you, in all honesty, I was... Alice in Wonderland wouldn't be a proper description of it. I was thrown into the deep end of the pool, and there was so much audio-visual impressions, I couldn't grasp it. For one thing, I'd never heard or seen a television set. I'd never imagined that people would blow their nose in paper and then throw it away. I never imagined that when you open a refrigerator, we didn't have a refrigerator when I was growing up. We didn't even have a bathtub. We had a pail, and you'd fill it up with hot water, and you'd try to reuse the water. I never imagined that you would open a refrigerator and a light would go on, and that you could have your own ice cream and your own soda like they do in stores. It was beyond. I thought, just like the cartoon, I thought there was a man in the box, because when I walked into my aunt's house, there was a close-up of the man going, tonight on the news, and I'm looking at this and looking that he's in black and white. I thought there was a man in the box at 8.5 years old. And every day that I've spent in America, I must tell you, I'm astonished.
I have read statements that you've made that suggest, and please correct me if I'm wrong, because I know that often there are incorrect statements out there, that indicate to me that at some level you define yourself sexually. You're very proud of your sexual abilities. You have talked quite a bit about women you've been with in terms of numbers. How many women have you been sexual with?
This comes up in every interview.
I know.
And
I don't want to be crass about it, but there's a reason why I'm asking.
I don't care. I mean, none of that crass is nonsense. It's all relative. I answer when I'm asked, but I don't go over to somebody and tug on their shirt sleeves.
Right.
In my life, many. Many, many. You want to know a number?
Do you have a number?
About 4,800.
4,800, okay. Are you talking about intercourse?
Oh, yeah.
So you wouldn't include just oral sex, for example? Okay, so you're talking about full intercourse with 4,800 women. Okay. Then help me with this. There's been, over the years, many discussions, both academic and in the public arena, about female orgasm. What is your opinion about that? Do you have any...
Well, women have to, in the patois of the street, have to come in their minds before the message reaches down there. Look, I can explain it as only in this way. for women. You are born with all the eggs you will ever manufacture, and by the time you're in your middle years, you stop you can't make any more eggs, which means you
Correct.
can't reproduce. So there's this kind of desperation among women to biologically reproduce by the time they're middle years, which is why I'm going to get my claws in him. He's a good catch. It all sounds like an animal that's going out on the hunt to grab a mate, because that's what you want
Well,
to
you
do.
would be talking about certain women.
No, it is a biological imperative, because in the course of a month period, you drop 2 eggs, we make 10 billion sperm. So you see, the big problem between men and women is ever since we both crawled out of the ooze we were both sort of created in, the female of the species has deluded herself into believing that all of his billions of sperm are just for her. That is the eternal cat and mouse game, and it will continue to torture women. It's not an issue for men, by the way. So all those song lyrics you've been listening to that you love, how can I live? Can't live, living is without you. Those are lies. The real lyric of truth, when men look at each other and they tell each other the truth because you can't handle it, is, how can I live without you? Actually, very easily. When a man makes a choice to be with a woman, it is more profound than when a woman makes a choice to be with a man. There is a built-in biological desperation to, you must have a man. All your magazines do that. 10 ways, how can I believe, what is this leading? Do I have my mother's hips? What is he thinking? Here's the shortest article in any woman's magazine. What is a man trying to figure out about us, women? Nothing. We're not curious at all. We're too busy doing our own stuff. So when a man wants to live with you for 25 years, he worships you, he adores you beyond anything. Companionship and monogamy is much more biologically directed on your end. Remember, we had to go from cave to cave and go after the wandering herds when, as Australopithecines on the plains of what was then known as the Olduvai Gorge in Tanganyika, we followed the wandering herds and did all that, or so Ellis Leakey and those people tell us.
Please help me. I really, really want some help from you. Vaginal, clitoral orgasms.
Oh, it's all good. Backdoor's good.
All right, but tell me percentages. Of this
Oh, I see.
4,800,
Oh, I don't have a
roughly
clue.
how many do you think came because you had your penis inside her?
Oh, I see.
How many came with your tongue? How many came with
With
digital
yes.
manipulation?
Well, is the tongue, the prodigious, that thing. Well,
Well, that would be another interesting, because is it because of your particular tongue, which is legendary, or, but tell me your view about it.
Initially, it's fame.
All right, so the
ultimate
aphrodisiac of fame.
is
Yes.
They only want to be with you because you're famous. And we're going, so? Yeah, but they don't know the real you. Yeah, so what? So men don't care. It doesn't mean, physically, how do I describe it? I actually don't know, because there were games like pin my tail on their donkey, which is, 5 to 7 line up, and you just bang, 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 and whoever I came in wins. There were games and all sorts of fun stuff. In the days before,
female orgasm wasn't important in this
well, when there's
game, of course.
When there's a group of them, not necessarily, but certainly in the past, I've prided myself in my abilities to sink a hole in one, if you will.
Okay.
In essence, without going for the humor of it, if there was an opening, I certainly had a stiff proposition.
I'd like to talk a bit about your father.
Sure.
What was he like?
What I recall from my early childhood was a very big man. Was a carpenter, couldn't make ends meet. Very bright, very creative, clearly a man born, or certainly found himself at the wrong time at the wrong place. Much more a free spirit, too into what he wanted to do. Never had a chance to see his dreams come. So he used to make this gorgeous furniture. He hand whittled a scooter, one of those things that on 2 wheels that you do. He literally whittled it by hand. So he was more a creative person and less a businessman. So he couldn't make ends meet. And because men have this pride thing, self-esteem thing that they have to have, or they can't face anybody else and they just give up and walk away because they can't face themselves, the scrutiny of being a failure to those people they're supposed to be, you know, the leaders of. My father failed. First financially, and then I think as a result of that, you know, in his family life and abandoning his child. And it's very clear to me that my relentless drive and ambition to want more and bigger and more powerful and succeed in areas I've never been, there's nothing I won't do to succeed. I don't want to become my father. I don't have to become my father. I can stay with my children and Shannon and raise a wonderful family on my terms.
It's clearly very important to you, and I understand the reasons for that. Particularly since the last time you saw your father, you had been living outside Tel Aviv, and your mother took you on a trip to Tel Aviv to try to find your father, who'd gone there to try to work.
Right.
And you traveled together to Tel Aviv. You looked around in all the usual places. You couldn't find him. So finally she took you to the cinema. And there at the top of the stairs, you were the first one who spotted your father. And what did you say?
I remember, or at least I thought I did, I saw my father with another woman, a blonde woman as a matter of fact.
What did you say to your mom?
I don't recall, something like, isn't that dad with another woman? Something
With
like
a
that.
blonde. How did your mum react when you said that?
I don't think I understood what the emotional impact was, but I
Sure.
do remember that my mother tugged me by my arm and we went off. And the next...
You looked through his apartment.
We went to his apartment and we looked through it. And in retrospect, I think my mother found a condom, which I didn't understand what that was at that
But
point.
incriminating evidence that
Well, it was his choice for his life.
Sure, sure.
And,
as far as she was concerned, it was incriminating.
As far as my mother was concerned,
Yes.
yeah. This is clearly a man who's my father who should never have gotten married.
How old would you have been? Very, very young.
When my father left us,
Yes.
I was close to 7.
So at 7 years old,
Right.
1 minute you're in a cinema looking at your father and you're saying to your mother, look, there's dad with a blonde.
Right.
And actually, that's the last time you ever see your father.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm just wondering, because it would be quite normal for a young child to, given the circumstances, perhaps decide that in some way you had caused the breakup of your parents. You had said this thing. Did that ever enter your mind? Did you ever
Not that I'm aware
think?
of. Not
Well,
that
think
I'm aware
about
of.
it, you know.
Well, it would explain a lot, but
What
I'm
would
not,
it explain?
Well, when you're young, you can't quite figure out why mom and dad aren't together because
Yes.
you're not. I do remember they fought physically. I remember being much younger, and I remember jumping on my dad's leg and biting his leg to stop the violence because he was much bigger. My mother's 5'5", and you know, taking my mother's side, but I didn't know what the words meant or anything. I was just trying to stop. I don't remember hitting, but certainly there was pushing and shoving. They were not happy. It was a miserable time, you know, sort of economically. There was no money.
Sure.
And of course, the thing that goes first is a man's dignity and self-respect.
Indeed.
It's castrating.
But none of that you were aware of at that age. So I'm just wondering if perhaps at some level you might have felt responsible.
I have to tell you that if I was writing a movie script, I'd go there, but I wasn't aware of it. It was just too, you know, I was just sort of bewildered by it all.
May I ask you, what was your first sexual experience like?
I was scared to death. I thought I broke some sort of law. I delivered newspapers. I had 2 newspaper routes. In New York, during the 60s, you had newspaper delivery boys. They would grab the local paper and go house to house and deliver it to those people that subscribed it. And it was during the Christmas holidays. It was cold, and
This was at 13 years old.
Yes, around that. Yeah, 13 to 14, yeah. And once a week I would go and collect the weekly sums of money that they'd have to pay for delivery, and plus I'd get a tip, and maybe I'd clear $30 a week, which was a lot of money in those days. So she was in her early 20s, I would imagine, drunk, and I was a kid who was scared to death trying to get my money. And I don't remember a lot of detail. All I remember is all of a sudden I had my winter coat on, and all of a sudden I was on the couch, and she mounted me. I mean, I was frozen. I didn't know what was going on. And afterwards I thought, oh my God, I hope I didn't break any laws or anything. And that was sort of the first time.
It makes sense that somebody who is a survivor of rape...
Oh, well, trust me, I never...
You never defined it as rape? Let
No.
me tell you, that's what you experienced. You were 13, she was in her 20s. You were raped.
I see.
And it makes a lot of sense that a man whose first experience was rape should thereafter make all of his sexual experiences with women about trying to gain control over them. After all, somebody who experiences rape is somebody who has no control. They are controlled by their abuser. I would suggest that it's possible that your entire sexuality and all of the 4,800 people that you have had sex with, one way or another, taken Polaroid pictures of, another means of gaining control over them, is really about trying to heal yourself or trying to gain mastery over that first terrifying, unlawful, wrong, embarrassing, nightmarish experience that you had sexually.
Good luck with that, by the way. It sounds very poetic and profound, and if I read it, I would think it was very profound. I don't see it that way, but that's okay.
You know, it's really unfortunate that in our society, if something like that happened to a woman, we would
terrible.
instantly see it as rape.
Of course.
It happens to men, and we don't see it as rape.
Because we don't define sex as the most important thing. You do.
You said it was terrifying. That's
Well,
what you said. It
yes,
was terrifying.
Yes, but you know, taking out of context, it's the wrong inference. I thought I was going to get in trouble because of somebody's wife and what's going to happen and that sort of thing. Not the physical stuff. I was unaware of where I was going, but I clearly
You had your
stated-
arms, you said to protect yourself from the oncoming car or whatever it was.
No, that's selective perception, respectfully.
Okay. Tell me about your tongue.
I have a long tongue.
Is it, I mean, how long is it? Is it sort of
Well, it will make...
unnaturally
Well,
long?
if you really get to know my tongue, you will certainly forget about Mr. Connolly very quickly.
Fighting talk.
Well, you shouldn't start something you're not going to finish.
Who said I wasn't going to finish it?
Anytime, on camera or off.
It's important for you to flirt with a woman, isn't it?
All women.
Yes.
Every woman should be flirted with because you take so much time to put on perfume and makeup, and you're insulted if men don't, whether they do anything about it, you want to be desired. I'm just doing what you want us to do. Look at all the time and effort you put on the perfume, and look at those nice red lips and the makeup and the eyes because you want to be desirable. I have news for you. We do find you enormously desirable. And
So
you've
what
succeeded.
exactly can you do with your tongue that perhaps Mr. Connolly, among others, couldn't do?
Well, it has a spin and dry cycle, and it could sure whip up a good goddamn froth.
All right, but what's the real answer?
The real answer is that a long time ago, a woman taught me the secret, and that is that once we learn how to make you come, we know nothing about the rest of the women, because every single goddamn one of you has a different combination to the lock.
But you don't spend long enough with each woman, or you didn't, to be able to figure that out.
Sounded like I was done, but I wasn't. And the answer is that if a man knows the alphabet, you don't have to know her combination. Start with the letter A, and then go to B, and and then do C, and then
Okay.
D, and you'll find the right letter that works.
So
And
it's
once you get-
basically good sexual communication. You find a way.
No, less talking. I'll be the driver. You be quiet. I'll take you along for the ride. This idea that it's back and forth, I don't think so.
Help me to
the
understand
government.
that specifically.
Well, during sex, there needs to be a leader.
All right, what do you start with?
What do I start? Verbal seduction.
Okay.
Sniffing, holding, touching. Take your time. And,
Then?
well, it depends. You know, there's sort of you react to it. A man has to be...
You learn something from that reaction.
Oh, yes. A man has to be... listen to the stop signs, and when you get a stop sign, it doesn't always mean stop. Because when a woman says no, it often means yes.
Well, you've certainly demonstrated how important it is for you to maintain control over any given situation. And I suppose that sometimes people in your presence would be affronted by that.
Too bad.
I'm not. I'm not at all.
Well, that's good.
What I see is the reasons for it, the need for it. And I think it extends to your sexuality, the need to control. And I think that there are two very important reasons for it. One is that I think for the best reasons in the world, your mother was extremely controlling with you.
Well, there was no choice.
There was no choice. She needed to be for her own reasons. But I think that as a child, the underlying feelings might have never, perhaps in your life, really surfaced, which I suspect are ones of some level of resentment for that. And I think there's a level at which you do feel the need to take back some of that control.
Well, I mean, respectfully, if you're lucky enough, the way I am, to have a choice in things, because, as you know, most people in the world don't have that choice. You either control life or it controls you.
Are you familiar with the notion of the taming power of the small? Which I think is an interesting concept in your life. You may have never become aware of this, but there are probably a lot of people in your life over whom you think you have control, but who actually may, by their quietness, their acceptance of your control, they may actually be the controllers. Would that be true?
You mean women?
Well, I suppose that Shannon may fall into that category.
Without question.
Yes.
She's...
I mean, you withhold marriage from her, possibly as a means of control.
No, because of a doubt of the nature of man. That's why.
Well, that's what you say, and that's what perhaps you think on the surface. But what it translates to, probably in her mind, is a sense that you are withholding this from her.
But you define marriage as something more or slightly different than what man defines it as. I mean, it's the endless conversation. Why can't you be just with me, you know, as opposed to all the other women in the world? Well, the other women in the world are torturing us just as much as you torture the next guy that walks by. Your bright colors and your perfume and all the rest of that. We're supposed to ignore all that. You know, we can barely, we can't multitask. And while we can be incredibly in love with the person we're with, physically, mentally, emotionally, at the same time, all these other bright colors and smells are walking by us and going, da 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 da. You know, why can't you?
You're painting a picture of male helplessness now.
Oh, we're not. We're helpless. We're completely aware of our sexuality. You think we're exactly the same. We're not even from the same planet.
Yes, but I'm trying to understand why a man would want to have
sex with a lot of women.
not just sex with a lot of women. I understand that perfectly.
You do?
But the way that you described it, you know, you want to have sex with no meaning. Your idea
I never said that, by the way.
Well, it's in your book. Sex
Yeah.
with no meaning. You said heaven was sex, you know, with no meaning. A night
Well,
with
the
no
poetic,
meaning.
the perfect date, and the blokes in England and everywhere else in the world will tell you they work hard all day, all the pressures, men against men, who's going to win out on top. And you want that respite, that moment, especially in your 20s and 30s, where it's not about, do you have a good sense of humor? You know, the hoops that you girls make the guys pull. What is he going? Does he have a good job? And all this kind of stuff, all the hoops they have to jump through to finally become intimate with a girl. their preference would be to wake up, certainly in their 20s and 30s, next to somebody whose name they never bothered to learn. Just sort of the more natural way, before civilization, before all that, before language and Moors and so on and so forth.
Can you see that that's a sort of defense against being controlled by a woman?
Well, I believe in my heart and soul that's what every man wants. You know,
They don't want that level of control.
They do. They want harems. They want nationfuls of women desiring them and thinking of them as the king of all women. Don't kid yourself for a second.
There was a time when you had, maybe not one time, when you had sex with both a daughter and a mother at the same time.
Oh, they were more than one. They were sisters, but they were legal. I mean, they were not
Sure,
underage.
legal age.
So I don't want the inference to be daughter and yeah, she
Oh
must have
yes,
been
no,
there.
I didn't mean that they were that the daughter was underage.
Certainly,
no,
I mean,
what I'm talking about is, did you feel at all uncomfortable? I mean, most of us.
Well, I have to tell you quite honestly that life throws circumstance in front of you and you're sort of unprepared for it. Here I am with a, I don't know, 19, 20-year-old beautiful girl in the middle of America someplace in the 70s. And we both decide as consenting adults in the privacy of my hotel room to do what came naturally. And it was very exciting and passionate and blah, blah, blah. And there's a knock on the door, and I look through the peephole, and there's a woman with a sort of a beehive hairdo, the cliche of, Midwestern Americana, and dressed conservatively, but very attractive. As a matter of fact, could be a relative, but she sort of resembled you a bit. And, I'm going, who's that? I thought it was the manager of the hotel. She was dressed very professionally, and the young girl says, that's probably my mother. And at that point, I got scared to death. I go, oh my God, she's underage, or she lied, or all this stuff. She goes, don't worry about it. She wanted to meet you. That's why I'm here. And it all of a sudden dawned on me that they had a different point of view. They weren't a part of the Puritan ethic. This sort of conservative.
She wanted to join in the fun, as you put it.
Oh, clearly.
So you had sex with the mother and the daughter at the same time.
Mm-hmm.
Did that make you feel uncomfortable? I mean, most of us would, because of the incest taboo that exists in our society, just normal human.
Why is that incest?
Incest taboo. Well, there is an incestuous feel about that,
I don't agree.
Mother and daughter having sex in the same situation, with the same man.
Not with each other.
No, but there is a sexual connection between the two of them. There's a yuck factor about that most people would go, yeah, whoa, you were quite okay with that.
At the time, yes.
Your mother really made you her partner from very early on, didn't she?
How do you mean?
You became her partner when your father left. You fought for her not to be with other men, and she acquiesced to that.
For a long time, yeah.
Yes.
I was wrong, but I think out of that, I hope nobody hurts my mother again, and also the immature male child, the Oedipal thing about, I don't want somebody to take my place, yeah.
Yeah, it's funny that you mentioned Oedipal, because, I mean, I'm not particularly a Freudian, but it is pretty much as you...
Well, it's in song. I want a girl just like the girl that married dear old dad. He's saying he wants to marry somebody like his mom.
Yes.
So, I mean, I'm clear about the sort of implications and all the other stuff. And there are all sorts of levels.
An almost incestuous relationship between you and your mother. And please don't think I'm being...
No, I think the first love affair that especially young male has is with his mother. I don't mean that anything sexual, because it's the first intimacy of any kind you have. It's the first kiss, not sexual kiss certainly, but it's the first kiss you have. It's the first... hopefully it's the first sense of love of any kind.
How do you feel about the future now?
Oh, great.
Have you got to the point where you're facing your mortality?
I'm not afraid of death. It's going to hit all of us at some point, either now or later. And the reason I'm at peace with the idea is because I've done it. Not just once, many times. And continue
What do you mean by that?
Success, emotionally, not becoming my father, being responsible, maintaining my own core of values. I refuse to get high or drunk because that's my personal choice, although I think if everybody wants to go and smoke cigarettes, get cancer, and continue to use crack and cocaine and all that stuff, go to it. I'm just not interested in being an enabler. You know, it's really pathetic what's happened to society, Western culture around the world. It is interesting to note that in Muslim culture, by hook or by crook, there are hardly any alcoholics, there are hardly any drug addicts, of course, because they're put to death. So I'm not saying you take the extreme point of view, but I do think that this lax, permissive society, Western culture, has allowed all kinds of behavior without any repercussions. You can be a drug dealer, deal drugs to my kids, and not be put to death. Put me in charge. Watch me get rid of drug addiction. If you're on crack, if you can't quit I would create gulags in the coldest parts of the world and create work camps. It's more humane because you get up, you're not clogged in a cell. You have to go out there, chop wood and build a road and do something so that you're doing something every day. And if you continue to deal crack to my kids, I will kill you.
It's almost...
I will put you to death.
It's almost identifying with the aggressor. I mean, if you'll forgive me, it's almost Nazism.
No, it's not. It's Old Testament. It's God. And which reminds me of a very funny joke, I think. Some people may get offended by it. Too bad. There's a knock on heaven's door, and God is sitting on the throne. Who is it? The door opens. It's Gandhi. All right, what do you believe in? Gandhi says, well, I believe in world peace. God, all right, I know. Come on over here, over to my left. Gandhi comes in, knock on the door. Who is it? Mother Teresa. God says, what do you believe in? Mother Teresa says, the poor of the world should do... Okay, I got it. Come on over here to my right. Knock on the door. Who is it? Gene Simmons. Aren't you that guy that sticks his tongue out? Yes, Lord, it is me. What do you believe in? I believe you're sitting in my seat.
You've summed yourself up so perfectly that I'm not going to even attempt to top it. What has it been like talking to me?
Well, you're a very attractive girl. If you were single, I'd flirt even more.
We touched on some deep feelings early on.
Not really. I think you're fair, incisive, without being judgmental. Your way, because everybody's a human being and has their own sort of process, is actually very calming. It's not too probing, not too fast. Overall, I'd give you an 80.
Thank you.
You're certainly welcome. It was a pleasure to talk to me.
Actor Tony Curtis is on the couch next week, Monday at 10. Tomorrow, find out where your bombs and your baps come from, ploughing the history of our daily bread in a true story at 10. But next, Neela needs some shut-eye. And is it all over for Greg?